All right. Hi and welcome, everybody. We'll give it about another minute or two before we get started and everybody's getting situated. Um, Let us know if you have any issues seeing or hearing things. You can drop things into the Q&A, but it looks like lots of people are hopping on, which is wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. Sarah will be on screen in just a moment, but in the meantime, my name is Jenny. I'm the founder and CEO here at Kari Prehab, and I want to thank you again for taking some time to spend part of your Saturday with us and come to learn about exercising for bone density and with osteoporosis. So we actually love hosting these webinars. They're a really, really nice way for us to connect with our community, which is all of you, and to issue some sort of actionable, tangible takeaways that you can implement into your bone health routine right away. So if you hopped on a couple of minutes early, you maybe saw that we had a graphic from the bone health and osteoporosis being displayed there, which was showing just how difficult it can be for people to get exercise guidance from their medical providers. So if you happen to see that, you maybe notice that 64% of people who ask for exercise guidance from their doctor are not able to get any clear or tangible exercise guidance. Now, that statistic is staggering considering that we have an enormous body of high quality research that looks into many, many aspects of exercising for bone density and overwhelmingly shows resistance and impact training to be a safe and effective intervention for osteoporosis. And this is true across the board, whether you have a osteopenia or osteoporosis, if you're using medication, or if you're opting to not use medication. Now, I'm guessing that many of you are here because you're interested in educating yourself about the different options that you have when it comes to managing your bone density. And one of the things that we hear the most often from our incoming clients joining our program is that when they feel like they don't have any options, when they are not given the right resources to pursue their bone density goals in the way that works for them, that can feel really disempowering and almost like you don't have control or agency over your own health. And that is a terrible feeling and not something that we want anybody to have to go through. So if any of this is sounding familiar or resonating with you, then you have come to the right place because this webinar and our entire program was created specifically for people like you to give you a choice and, more importantly, to give you evidence-based, research-backed information with which to make that choice. So I want to really emphasize the fact that everything that we're sharing in this webinar and everything that is included in our program is evidence-based and reliable because it comes from trustworthy, high-quality data. So nothing here is our opinion or conjecture. It is all absolutely based on the research. So we're really excited to dive in and get into the presentation, but I wanted to give you a couple of logistical heads up about how the session is going to run today. All of the information in this webinar is general in nature and does not constitute guidance or a medical advice or diagnosis. Our goal is to offer some actionable takeaways that you can implement in your bone health routine right away, but they are general in nature. In a couple of days, probably on Monday, you're going to receive a follow-up email from us that's going to include a replay of the webinar. So you can go back to any of this information anytime that you want to take another look at it, the research or the exercise component, which you're welcome to either follow along with today or just watch. The other thing that email is going to include is access to our free bone density video series. So this is a great resource if the information that you get here today lands and feels relevant to you, and you want to take a deeper dive into the sort of hows and whys of bone metabolism, and specifically why resistance training and impact training are so effective when it comes to improving bone density. Now, here's the important part. You will only receive this email if you've opted in actively to hear from us again, to receive our newsletters. So we legally are not allowed to email you if you opted out. If you're already subscribed to our newsletter, then you're going to get the email. If you just signed up for this webinar and this is the first time that we're meeting you and you opted in, you'll also get it. If you didn't opt in or you're unsure if you opted in, you can simply send an email to us so that we can double check and make sure that you receive that resource if you would like. So we're going to go into a little bit of lecture. There's going to be a practical movement component, which you're welcome to follow along with. And there's always the Q&A portion at the end where we can answer all of your questions. You're welcome to pop your questions into the Q&A box at any time. If you have logistical or practical questions, Juliana, our executive assistant, and myself will be moderating that throughout the webinar. If you have more kind of juicy, interesting bone health questions, we'll leave those for the Q&A section at the end because it's really helpful for everybody to hear the answers to those questions. So without any further ado, I'm excited to introduce our presenters, our program co-creators today. Michaela Smith is our osteoporosis program director. She's a yoga medicine therapeutic specialist, a NASM certified personal trainer. She's got a degree in nutrition, and she's a nutritional therapy practitioner as well. So her very broad background in women's health gives her a really amazing set of resources when it comes to working with bone density and menopause and exercise and resistance training specifically. Dr. Sarah Avery is our other program co-creator. She's a doctor of physical therapy and a professional yoga therapist, and she's also the owner of In Motion Integrative Physical Therapy and the Moon Cycle Seed Company. She's a dedicated women's health specialist, and her expertise integrates physical therapy, yoga therapy, and this broad holistic approach to wellness, which also really emphasizes and highlights the need for resistance and impact training to support bone health at all phases of life. So I'm excited to hand it over, Sarah and Michaela. Take it away.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're so excited to share this presentation. I just need 1 second to share my screen. Okay. So today we're talking about strength training and yoga for osteoporosis. And I'll let Sarah kind of kick it off.
Sure. I think a good place to start our discussion is what is osteoporosis? And most people that I chat with understand osteoporosis to be a condition where bones become weaker and more likely to fracture. But from a PT perspective, it's not really just about bone loss. It's about what we can do to keep you staying strong. Bone is this living tissue that responds to stress. So, with movement and resistance training and impact, we can actually build resilience of that tissue. And instead of fearing osteoporosis, I want you to feel empowered to work with your body. And on a cellular level, we have cells called osteoblasts, and these are cells that help to build bone. And we have osteoclasts, which help to break down and absorb decaying bone. Osteocytes are the cells that kind of help coordinate this whole process. And problems happen when the breakdown of the bone, so the osteoclast activity, kind of outpaces the laying down of bone, which is the osteoblast activity. And this is where we start to see osteoporosis kind of creep its way in. And the most common sites that we do see fractures are in the spine, specifically the lumbar or low back, and then compression fractures in the thoracic spine. So, kind of in that mid back area, just kind of between the shoulder blades, and as well as the wrist. So, we often when a DEXA scan is performed, they often do the hips, which are also the third most common site of fractures. They do the hips in the spine, but they often don't do the wrist. So that it is also a place that we want to consider that resistance training and stimulating those osteoblast activity. And these are all joints that really impact how we move through our life. So staying strong and mobile and active really becomes that much more important. And we can head over to the next slide here, and I'll just kind of discuss some important statistics. Osteoporosis is still really a big health concern. And even though it's affecting slightly fewer people than before, which is very exciting, around 10 million Americans aged 50 and over have osteoporosis. Another 44 million are said to have weaker bones, which is kind of in that osteopenia range just before you reach osteoporosis. And this does also put people at higher risk for fractures within that group. Women, of course, are most impacted, and we see the sharpest decline of 20% of bone loss, which occurs within the first 5 to 7 years after menopause. So you'll kind of see that sharper decline after you start getting your bone density scans. So before that is actually a good time to do to tend to your bone health and start these strength training exercises, but it's also never too late to start. You can always see benefits from strength training. And while women going through menopause are at higher risk because of those hormone changes, osteoporosis can also affect men and people with certain conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, diabetes, or people taking medications long term like steroid use and or corticosteroid use too. And to keep the bones strong, it really is important not only to participate in some kind of effective weight bearing and progressive loading exercise program, but it's also important to eat a healthy diet with enough, calcium and vitamin D and other micronutrients to assimilate the calcium and vitamin D in the bones. And to also improve other lifestyle habits. So we're taking a look at things like smoking and alcohol use, getting good enough sleep consistently, and also stress reduction, because the stress hormone response actually does play a role in bone health as well. It's also a good idea to get a bone density test after 40 years and typically every 2 years, especially if you have any risk factors. And this is important to catch osteoporosis early and to help prevent fractures. It's become surprising to me that the people on these um, that participate in these webinars, we get a lot of Q&A at the end about people's doctors not saying that they need a bone density scan and they're over the age of 40. So it's not to say that every single person needs to do that, but it is a good idea to get a baseline. So it might be a good idea to talk with your doctor or your OBGYN if you are over the age of 40 and nobody has um, offered to send a referral to get a bone density scan. So a little bit of advocacy for yourself and your health and wellness might be a good idea there, to ask for a density scan. All right.
Okay. So after diagnosis of osteoporosis, it's really common to see a lot of fear come up. That is because that loss of bone density is going to increase the risk of fractures, and those fractures might be a result of compression fractures or from the result of a fall. And that is really alarming to many people because it makes them start to feel like they're fragile, and it can cause them to really pull back from activities that they love and cause a lot of anxiety over everyday activities. And then many people are concerned about taking medications related to side effects. So they're looking for another option to build that bone density. And as Yenny mentioned in the beginning of the call here, oftentimes this kind of prescription of exercise is not offered as a solution. So we really just want to make sure that you are feeling seen in those fears that come up from a diagnosis, and are also aware of the support you can have without medication or in addition to medication. So that's where we come back to this fear not mentality, because there are things that you can do to improve your bone density naturally. And it's all about finding that right stimulus, dose, and then maintaining consistency so that you can really get back to doing the things you love. You can get back to your daily life and have less fear as you go through it. And something that we think is really important as well when it comes to osteoporosis management is community. So we know how isolating it can feel when you get this diagnosis and you might start to kind of have to pull back from activities, or you have that fear when you're moving throughout your day, and it can just make you feel kind of alone. And so we really want to bring in a community as well that makes you feel supported, heard, and understood, and then has that same goal of really supporting yourself through exercise and lifestyle to improve that osteoporosis. A key thing here is that we really highly recommend that you work with a professional who specializes and has experience working with osteoporosis to really give you that confidence and safety to build that bone density back. So when we think about what are the exercise kind of modalities that we want to use to build bone density, we're really looking at strength training, but in our program, we also pull in yoga for its other benefits. So we use both of these modalities to really holistically address osteoporosis. Strength training is going to provide the external load that's needed to stimulate those osteoblast cells to lay down more bone. And yoga has many benefits related to bone health, including building balance and coordination, improving posture to help prevent those compression fractures, and then helping to manage stress reduction. Like Sarah said in that very first slide, stress actually plays a really big role in your bone health because of its effect on the endocrine system. So using tools to minimize the stress is actually a really great way to support your bone health overall as well.
Great. That leads us into our next topic. We are discussing the three pillars of holistically improving bone density. And when we're talking about improving bone density, it's never really just one thing, it's a combination of all of these pillars that work together. First is progressive loading. This is where we're gradually increasing resistance to challenge your strength, as well as impact to signal the bones to get stronger. This is uh, the reason why I wanted to note those bone cells in the previous slide. So the osteoblast stimulation is what we're trying to target here, that laying down of new bone so that we can begin to outpace that absorption of bone. And you need that resistance in order to do that. And this includes axial loading, which is this concept where you're using exercises and forces that go down through the spine and the hips and creates kind of this compression in a safe way. You could think like squats or carrying weights down by your side, even when you're carrying your groceries, you're doing compressive and axial loading there because the force is going straight down toward the ground. This is especially effective for stimulating bone growth in those key areas like the hips and the low back. And then another note there, um, plank position is stimulating the axial load through the wrists. So that's a nice position to be in. It's not the only position to help stimulate those wrists. It's just an example. The second pillar here is posture. Good alignment helps to reduce strain on the joints, especially around the hips, the low back, the neck and shoulders. And this allows your muscles and bones to work more effectively to keep you upright and in a good position. And we also want to avoid stress being placed on the front part of the spine, especially in the mid back, in order to decrease the risk of compression fractures as we age over time. And third is balance. And if we can stay steady and prevent falls, we are actually protecting bones that we are working so hard to strengthen. When we train all three of these, so our progressive loading and axial loading, our posture and our balance, we are setting ourselves up for long-term strength and resilience. And we'll explore each of these more in detail in the next slide here.
Doing that classic little won't change the slide for me there. So here we are, we're going to dig into a little bit of that effective loading. So loading is really the keystone of building that bone density. And then balance and posture really help to minimize fracture risk. So when it comes to building bone density, we are looking at this idea of Wolff's Law, and that's a principle that states that bones are going to adapt to the mechanical loads that are placed on them to become stronger. And then I always like to point out that this is true in reverse. So you adapt to the loads that are placed on you, become stronger. But if you're not placing any load on the bone, there's no signal, there's no reason for your bones to maintain or get stronger. So lack of load is actually a stimulus. It's just a maladaptive stimulus that will signal that you don't need to maintain or really create that strength. So it's really important to remember that whether you're strength training or not strengthening, you're sending a signal to your body and you have a choice of which signal you want to send. So as Sarah mentioned, there's a few important factors that we want to consider when we're thinking about strength training specifically for osteoporosis, and that's the inclusion of axial loading, impact exercises, and progressive overload. So starting with axial loading, that's that compressive force that's coming from the top down, and the bone loves this force to lay down new tissue. And we're thinking about this in terms of stimulating, again, those osteoblasts. We want to build up the bone cells. And like Sarah said, we want to kind of outpace the osteoclast, that resorption, to improve that bone density. Remember that there's a healthy compression, which is that really kind of well aligned compressive force from the top down, and that's different from compression fractures. I know hearing compressive force and compression fractures can get a little bit muddy and confusing, but we're thinking about applying that force when we're in a really good alignment and we're actually trying to prevent compression fractures by using that. Some examples of axial load are going to include overhead press. So that little girl in her pink bra and shorts, she's got the weights over her head there, and the force of those weights is coming straight down through her spine, her wrists, her spine, and her hips to target all of those key areas of osteoporosis. So that's an example that we use all the time. We also use goblet squats, deadlifts, farmer's carries, and even though farmer's carries, the weight is down by your side, it's a little bit harder to visualize that kind of top-down loading. If you've ever carried a set of heavy groceries, or if you have farmer's carried before with weights by your side, you can feel that there's a force coming down through the shoulders that's pressing on the spine, pressing on the hips. The next thing that we want to use is impact exercises. So instead of having that kind of top down loading, now we're getting that ground reaction force from the ground up, and that's still providing that kind of same compressive and stimulation into the bones. That's going to, again, improve that osteoblast activity and stimulate new bone growth. Some examples of that include heel jumps, stomping. We don't actually use box jumps in our program, despite the graphic. That's just the best impact graphic I could find. But we really like to progress those nice and slowly so that you can have all of the benefits of impact exercises without posing a risk for fractures. And then progressive overload is the last piece of this loading puzzle. And that's the idea that we're going to continually increase the challenge to make sure that your bones have that stimulus to lay down new bone cells. So if we stay at the same challenge forever, we start to be in a place of maintenance rather than growth. So we want to make sure that we're continually challenging those bones to get stronger by increasing the challenge in small and progressive ways. This is done over time and very mindfully so that we're not placing too much stress and risking injury, but we are providing the right amount of stimulus. And then the key here again is that really intentional loading, selecting the exercises that are going to be the most effective, and then avoiding any contraindicated movements. So if you have osteoporosis, you've probably been told to avoid rounding forward, and we're really going to dig into that. I'm sure in the Q&A and in the demo, we have some talk about that as well. But we make sure that we include exercises that keep you really upright, and we teach you how to maintain that position in the spine, because that is really important to make sure that the movements are not only effective, but they're safe.
Great. Our next pillar is posture. And usually, when I say that to people in person, they immediately kind of straighten up. But improving posture really isn't just about standing up straight. It's about having good mobility in the joints, good stability around the joints and the muscles, and having good strength. And all three of these work together, as we mentioned, to help, especially with your posture. And first, we need enough mobility in places like the thoracic spine, so that mid back that we mentioned, in your shoulders and your neck to even get into good alignment. If the head, which weighs about 15 pounds on average, is forward, it becomes really challenging to hold it on top of our bodies, and our muscles have to work extra hard to do that work. And over time, we might see the shoulders kind of round forward, and you might fall into what we call a kyphotic posture. Where the thoracic spine is rounded a little bit more forward than we would like to see in normal anatomy. Um, Mobility alone, though, isn't enough. We also need stability. And this is your muscle's ability to hold you in good alignment, especially when you're against the forces of gravity that want to pull you down. In areas like the neck, the hips, and your core, and even surprisingly, your feet play a big role in helping keep us upright throughout the day. And then finally, there is strength. This is the force that actually builds that resilience and signals the bone building cells to kind of get to work here. And we want to strengthen especially the neck, the back of the shoulders, the glutes, and your core to help support good posture and bone density. So it's not just about kind of drawing the shoulders back here, it's also about creating stability and strength around your core, which also includes the glutes and around the hip muscles. And then yoga really does play a big role here too in posture. It's not just for flexibility, but it's also for building body awareness. It's also for improving your breathing mechanics and also reducing that kind of stress and anxiety that might build up after you receive a diagnosis of osteoporosis. Um, a lot of people feel fearful, as Michaela said, after being diagnosed with osteoporosis, which could eventually lead to this kind of guarded posture where you're increasing stiffness and you might experience some shallow breathing in the neck and shoulder area, and also in the chest. But when we learn to kind of breathe fully and deeply, we support our rib cage. We also improve posture from the inside out, and we start to move with more confidence with this diagnosis. And really, it's all connected. And with a consistent practice, not only with strength training, but with yoga as well, posture becomes something that your body will naturally find again.
Okay, and our last pillar here is that balance piece. So this really comes into play in terms of reducing fracture risk related to falls. And we have three components that make up the balance system in the body, and that includes our proprioception, our visual system, and our vestibular system. That vestibular system is the inner ear, and proprioception are these little sensory receptors that are in the tendons, the joints, and the muscles. And they give us what we kind of call like our body awareness system. It tells you where you are in space. All three of these systems together are signaling to your brain where you are in space with their own kind of unique perspective. And they help you to stay upright and to move kind of at this right pace and to coordinate your body to account for anything around you or the surface underneath you. We really focus in on this idea of dynamic balance and coordination. So this, if you look at the graphics, there's that yoga pose, that tree pose that many people know, and that is more of what we would consider like a static balance exercise. It has its place, and we do use tree pose, but we also really like to pull in this idea that if you're moving throughout the day, it's not very common that you're going to be just kind of challenging yourself to stand on one foot, but really that you need to be reactive and dynamic in your balance system to respond to maybe your foot slipping off the edge of a curve or a rock underneath your foot that moves, so that you can really respond to those changes, pull yourself back to balance, and avoid that fall. So we really utilize both strength training and yoga to build up that balance. Strength training builds more stability and strength in the muscles. It also, in the way that we use strength training with free weights, it helps to build up the core, and those weights kind of pull you out of your center of gravity, and you have to learn how to coordinate and pull yourself back into balance. And then yoga, like Sarah mentioned, it's so great for building body awareness. So you just start to create more of that proprioception, more of that understanding of where you are in space. And then it also helps you to move through different planes of motion. So you're not just moving forward and back, you're moving side to side on the mat, you're changing direction, and really finding this kind of 360 degrees of balance as you move around your space. And the two together really help to support that balance system. It's always important to note that balance is one of the slowest things to see changes in. So give yourself a lot of time and patience if you're working on that balance, and know that with consistent repetition, it will come, but it might take a while. So don't get discouraged. And then next we have our optional practice. So Sarah's going to walk me through some movement practices. I'm going to just switch to my webcam so you can see my little practice space. But these are the equipment that you'll need if you would like to join us. And if you don't have all of these things right on hand, that's totally okay. You can watch, and you can always come back to the recording and kind of move through some of them on your own time as well. So I'll just leave this up here for another moment. So if you do want to grab anything, you can. And then in a moment, I'm just going to switch to a slide that has our upcoming start dates and a QR code you can scan if you want to pop over to our website and check it out.
Thank you so much, Michaela and Sarah. That was fantastic. Thanks for that overview. As we head into the practice component, I just wanted to talk a little bit about our upcoming program start dates. So as you can see, we do have groups starting on specific dates at approximately 4 to 6 week intervals throughout the year. So you can select a time that works best for you if you're interested in joining one of our highly interactive and supportive osteoporosis groups. The September 15th and October 22nd dates have a little asterisk next to them because these are actually programs that include extended access because they span a holiday period. The other thing that's kind of special about these fall cohorts is that we are offering an extended payment plan. So if you're worried about your budget or you just want to spread the cost over a longer period of time, you have the option of signing up for those fall cohorts with a 5-month payment plan instead of the usual 3. Now, Sarah and Michaela are our program co-creators. All of the instruction in the program is delivered by them via fully narrated and demonstrated videos that were custom filmed for this program, and they're specific to osteoporosis. If you're interested in finding out more about our program, that QR code, like Michaela mentioned, will take you to our website. So you can just pop open the camera app on your phone, point it at that QR code, and you'll be taken to our website where you have the option to sign up to find out more about the program and get updated about new program start dates and features and things like that. So yeah, let us know if you have any questions at all. I see lots of you are already putting some things in the Q&A, which is wonderful. We'll get to those after the movement component, since there are some really interesting things to discuss there. Keep popping your questions into the Q&A. Michaela and Sarah, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and get started on the movement demo there.
Great, thank you. All right. Michaela looks set up here, and hopefully everybody else is as well. I will point out that if you know that you have some kind of wobbliness or instability when you are in a standing position, you might just consider being near a chair, a counter to hold onto, or a wall, just to give you a little bit of stability and to be safe with these movements, but they're pretty basic and foundational here. First, I wanted to discuss a hinge versus a squat, and more importantly, what a neutral spine looks like versus a flex spine. So, a hip hinge is a bend at the hips with a neutral spine. Yeah, nice flat spine there. And then you have minimal knee movement with that one. So you can see that Michaela is slightly bending her knees, but she's not kind of coming down into a squat position. And this is great for targeting your glutes and hamstrings and your back. So all of these kind of muscles throughout the back of the body. Um, thank you. And then a squat involves both hip and knee bending with a more upright torso, but still having a nice neutral flat spine. And this focuses more on your quads, so the tops of the thighs in the front, your glutes, and your core. In both of these, we, like I said, want to see a neutral spine, keeping kind of the natural curves of the spine. And a flex spine means rounding. So in a hip hinge here, we would not want to see this kind of curve that you see falling forward in Michaela's spine. This puts extra strain on the spine and makes the movement less stable. And with osteoporosis, the flex spine increases pressure of the front of your vertebrae and it raises the risk for compression fracture. So a neutral spine means a safer and stronger movement pattern. And then we will move into our deadlift demonstration here, which is a classic hinge pattern that Michaela just demonstrated. It does help to build glute and hamstring strength, so behind the tops of the thighs here. And then it also loads the spine safely and works those glutes. This does stimulate bone growth when done with a neutral spine. And we want to go ahead and hold weights down by your hips. You can use either dumbbells or kettlebells. And you're going to soften the knees and push the hips back into a hinge position, keeping the back flat and the core nice and braced here. And then when you stand up, you're going to drive the hips forward to stand up nice and tall and give the shoulder blades just a gentle squeeze, but not so much that you're kind of puffing the chest forward. Good. And this is important because that posterior chain strength, that back of the body, is really key for bone loading and improving that spine health when done with good form. Okay. And thank you very much for the excellent demo, Michaela. We are going to move now into a little bit of a balance component. So you can put your weights down, and the first one that we'll do, we call march with rotation. This is where you might grab onto a little pillow, like a couch pillow or something that you might have that's pretty light. And you're going to hold that pillow out in front of you. And as Michaela lifts up her right leg, she's going to turn her body, twisting the upper body to the right side. Notice how her head and shoulders are moving in the direction that she's going as well. And then come back to center, place the foot down to kind of progress forward. And then go ahead and take the other side, march, rotate, come back to center, and then place the foot down to progress forward. So at home, you can kind of go through a couple of repetitions of these if you're following along. If you kind of get to the end of the room or your space, you can simply turn around and head back in the same direction to get a couple of repetitions here with that one. This is a core and a balance drill. This adds to a stability challenge while you're kind of mimicking a gait or a walking pattern. And this helps to reduce fall risk and helps to build hip control. You're also getting that loading through the hips and the low back with this one. All right. Nice job. If you survived that one, you can definitely survive this next one. Um, it's a simple single leg stance. I say simple, but it might be a little wobbly for some people. Please don't be discouraged if you notice that your foot and ankle are wobbly, because that is that proprioceptive system, our nerves that are sending a message to our brain where our body is in space, and they are responsible for helping you keep your body upright. So that's all to say that if your ankle is wobbly, it's doing its job at keeping you upright. So yay. A single leg stance is just as it sounds. You can go ahead and hover one foot off the ground. Be mindful not to hook that foot around the calf or, place the foot on you in tree pose. And I'm really challenging Michaela here by hanging on to this one. She's doing great. And then if you are following along, you can go ahead and place that foot down and try out the other side. Now, this type of movement targets the ankle, the knee, and hip stability. It's great for improving balance and joint control, which are both very important for fall prevention. Good. And you can go ahead and relax there, bringing the foot down. And these could be challenged a little bit by standing on a pillow. So if you are very daring and want to try this out, you can go ahead and put your pillow on the ground and come to stand on that pillow. And this is one where you might consider being next to a wall or a sturdy surface here to hold on to. But as you hop onto that pillow, you can kind of notice that it might be a little more challenging to hold that position. And you might feel that the ankle is adjusting a little bit more than it was in that first version. And of course, go ahead and switch to the other side. You might notice that one side might feel a little bit different than the other, and that is perfectly normal. Good. And then when you are finished with that, you can go ahead and come on off your pillow to sturdy ground, move that pillow off to the side, and then we will come into a couple demonstrations of some posture exercises that are included in our programming. First, we'll start with the overhead press. This is one where you can sit down and you'll go ahead and grab onto some lighter weights or your soup cans if that's what you had handy. And you're just going to come to sit on the edge of the chair there, not all the way to the edge. You want to feel supported and get your feet about hips distance apart and nice and flat on the ground. And the this is a good demonstration, as we mentioned before, of what axial loading looks like in a different way, where we have a force going overhead here. This helps to build upper body and postural strength, and it teaches us how to safely lift things overhead, which is often a fear with osteoporosis. But it's really important to train this uh, when we do it with good form. So to start this movement, you'll go ahead and place the dumbbells right in front of the shoulders here. They're not necessarily resting on the shoulders, they're just kind of touching. This is called the racked position. You're pulling your elbows in toward each other, and then you want to keep the dumbbells parallel to the floor through that whole movement. And then Michaela's going to go ahead and press straight up overhead, and she's kind of bringing her biceps or her upper arms right up next to the ears here so that she's getting that weight directly over the shoulder. What we want to avoid here is the weight being in front of the shoulder, as she can see here. Uh, if that is happening, it's putting a lot of strain on the shoulder. So we really want to make sure that we're getting it straight up overhead with that one. And if you want to go through a couple of repetitions of that with Michaela as you're following along there, you're just pressing up, really pressing those fists right up to the ceiling and getting that axial loading, really feeling that. All right, and let's take about 3 more of those. And with this one, you also want to avoid arching your back. And also you want to lower with control. Okay. Excellent. Nice job with that one. Okay, next, we're going to move into an exercise called rows. You can catch on to either your light weights or use slightly heavier dumbbells if this is an exercise that you are pretty comfortable with. And we call these actually 3-point rows. So Michaela's going to place one hand on the chair and then put her weight in the opposite hand. The the foot of the side that the weight is in the hand, you're going to step that back and then offer yourself a slight bend in that front leg and the knee. And then Michaela's going to go ahead and pull that weight up toward the chest without letting the elbow kind of flare out to the side. So she's going to hug it nice and close into her body there. And should be feeling that behind the shoulders. You notice how she has a nice flat spine here. And then she'll go ahead and slowly lower that weight down toward the floor. And then go ahead and take a few repetitions of this. And you want to also maintain those shoulders and hip points kind of facing down toward the floor equally. So as she's lifting up, she's not opening up the chest and kind of rotating to the side like this, right? She has a nice neutral level shoulder position there. And after you get to about 6 to 8 of those, you can go ahead and put the weight in the other hand and switch your legs out, place the opposite hand on the chair and take your repetitions on the other side. With rows, this helps to strengthen the upper back and really helps to support an upright posture. Good. And, that's important for counteracting that rounded kyphotic posture that we're trying to avoid over time. Awesome. All right. So you should be kind of even there on your repetitions. When you finish that up, you can come to stand and you can move your weight off to the side. And our last one are band pull aparts. So go ahead and grab onto a light resistance band or a resistance loop, whatever you have handy. And with this one, it's simple but a powerful exercise to improve posture and kind of that upper back strength. And it's especially helpful if you tend to sit a lot, whether it's for work or driving or leisure. And if you notice that you're kind of rounding forward. So this is kind of just like a good for life exercise to incorporate into your routine. And you're going to hold that band at shoulder height with the palms down. And you're going to pull the band apart, pressing the pinkies kind of toward the back wall here. And then you're gently squeezing the shoulder blades together, and then you'll return to that start position nice and slow. And with this one, as you pull apart, be mindful that you're not arching the back and allowing the rib cage to kind of tilt upward. So that will require you to bring in a little bit of core stability and strength with that one. All right. And again, this reinforces that upright posture and mid back strength. So this is an excellent one to do. And be mindful that you are breathing with this one. If you notice the shoulders kind of creeping up toward the ears, you might check in that you're using appropriate exhales throughout that movement just to kind of release that tension in the muscles. Right. So when you get to about 10 of those, you can go ahead and move that band off to the side, and that completes our movement demonstration. I hope you enjoyed some of these foundational movements that we incorporate into our programming, and hopefully, there's some tips in there that you could take along with you.
Perfect. Thank you both so much for that, for the movement demo. I'm sure we'll get more questions about that, and we're happy to address anything else that comes up and the other queries that arose from the movement demo. We're going to head into the Q&A section, so feel free to continue putting your questions into that Q&A box. Before we do that, I'm going to quickly pop a poll up onto your screen. So the reason that we do this is because, like I mentioned, every single exercise that you saw in that movement demo, everything in the presentation is based on research. But if you are a person with low bone density and you're out on the internet looking for solutions for your low bone density, you see a lot of things competing for your attention, and some of them are more or less evidence-based than others. So we are very interested in hearing what you perceive to be effective bone density innovations based on what you've seen out on the internet or what you've been marketed with. So I'm going to pop up the poll right now. And it just takes a minute or two, or actually not even that, probably like 20 seconds to answer the question there. And the information that you give us really helps us to provide better educational materials for our community members, our newsletter subscribers, and kind of understand what people's perception is of these specific movement and exercise modalities and how effective they are when it comes to bone density specifically. So while you're doing that, I am gonna go ahead and add our other panelists into the mix here as we begin the Q&A section. And in addition to Sarah and Michaela, who you know by now, we also have Karen and Kenny joining us. They are both senior coaches in our program, which means they're leading our groups through their program in our virtual setup here. Kenny is a strength and conditioning coach with extensive experience working in person and in the virtual program, and with group fitness as well as kind of one-on-one individualized strength training. And he has lots of experience working directly with osteoporosis, partly with Sarah and Michaela in person at their in-person program as well. Fun facts about him: he's a competitive powerlifter who I feel like every time I see a new Instagram post from him, he has PR'd something new at another meet. And he's an avid golfer as well. Karen Weinstein is a very highly qualified movement professional with tons of experience with osteoporosis as well. She's an ERYT 500 yoga instructor, which is the highest level of credentialing with yoga. She's a Yoga Alliance continuing education provider, a certified personal trainer. She has lots of specialization in anatomy, strength training, breathing practices, functional movement, and biomechanics. And she's a total research nerd as well. So she's here to answer your questions on all of that too. So let's get into the Q&A right now. We've got some really good questions here. Cynthia asks about weighted vests, which I am going to hand that over in a moment to one of our coaches, as well as trabecular bone score and bone turnover markers. So these are great questions. Trabecular bone score and bone turnover markers are really useful data pieces to have that just tell you more about the state of your bones and bone density and bone strength and bone quality. Any test like that is going to be most useful if you have like a baseline established, and then you do the measurement again later, and you have something to compare it to, essentially. So we're all for any technology that expands on the traditional DEXA scan, which I think many people know is a little bit limited. And I'm actually a member of the Committee of Corporate Advisors over at the International Osteoporosis Foundation. And one of the other committee members is the company that makes the TBS technology. So we are in regular communication with them too about the advancements and the developments in their technology, and we're all for it. Michaela, maybe you can talk a little bit about the weighted vests.
Yes, weighted vests have become a really hot topic very recently. We love weighted vests. We use them in our program. They provide more of that axial load, so you can really just picture that vest sitting on your skeleton, creating that healthy compression. And then I think some of the kind of heat that weighted vests have been taking recently is that many people are really promoting them as like the bone density improver. They are a piece of the puzzle. They are not the biggest piece. We really want to focus on strength training progressively for the rest of your life to really support your bone health. But we really like weighted vests as a kind of cherry on top, another tool, another way to really just enhance the effects of improving your bone density.
Great answer. Thanks so much. Cindy is asking, what is the difference, if any, between strength training and weight training, or are the two terms synonymous? Karen, do you maybe want to handle that one?
Sure.
Yeah, they are synonymous in my book. Unless one of you experts has a different answer, feel free to jump in. But yes, they are synonymous, and we're talking about things that are beyond body weight training. We want to make sure when it comes to osteoporosis that we're adding more external load, which is part of why the weight vest alone isn't going to cut it, because your body adapts really well to whatever new input you're throwing at it. So we need to keep slowly increasing the amount of challenge and the amount of input that your body is getting.
Thanks so much. And actually, maybe you can expand on that a little bit more, kind of partly recapping some of what's been discussed in the lecture too. I'm looking at the poll coming in. 57% of people believe that walking improves bone mineral density, and 53% believe that yoga improves bone density.
Okay, yeah, so I'll tackle both of these because the answer for both of these is the same. As I mentioned a moment ago, those are just body weight activities. Walking is something you've been doing probably since you were 1 year old. So your body is very, very acclimated to carrying your own body weight around. And if that was enough, you wouldn't have osteoporosis or osteopenia to begin with. And yoga is really no different. It's a body weight activity. And even though there are different shapes and things involved, which is great for proprioception and balance, it really just isn't enough loading to make a difference. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much. This is a very common misconception that we are very often rectifying. Somebody's asking, I keep hearing don't bend because of back issues. So should I be limiting certain yoga moves? So hopefully that was at least largely answered by the explanation and the demonstration of the hip hinge, which allows you to keep your spine in neutral rather than rounding or flexing your spine, which is the movement that's considered to be more risky. Sarah, maybe you can talk a little bit, just kind of recap the hip hinge neutral spine concept. And then the follow-on question is, should I be limiting certain yoga moves? We know that twisting is another one that frequently gets a bad rap. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah, again, so the hip hinge is, you're sending the hips back and leaning the torso forward while still maintaining a nice long spine. With a minimal knee bending. And with the squat, you are keeping the torso a little more upright, bending the knees slightly more, but still providing yourself with that hip hinge, both maintaining a nice neutral long spine, really honoring the natural curves of the spine. Um, Honestly, with osteoporosis, we want to protect the spine, of course, right? This is kind of the whole message that we're sending along here. Um, but especially in the front part of the vertebrae. And like I said, this is more prone to compression fractures. And that is why we like to avoid deep forward bending and twisting, especially when you have a rounded spine. But really, it's not about fear in your yoga class. Our spines are really meant to move, and they do like that twisting and flexion. We just want to move in a smart way. In yoga, that means hinging at the hips, keeping a neutral spine, and using props when needed, and not seeing props as a regression in your practice, but rather looking at it as a tool to succeed in the pose a little bit better. Um, for your own body. And I like to think of it in most cases as bringing the floor up to you so that you can kind of settle into a pose nicely. So again, it's not about restriction. It's really about kind of moving with intention to stay strong and safe.
That's a great answer. And something else that we talk about pretty often is the fact that, like it was mentioned during the presentation, that the spine is designed to move, and actually structures like the intervertebral discs, the little pads between your vertebrae, they absolutely rely on movement in order to stay nice and plump and healthy, which is also how they're creating space between the vertebrae and reducing your risk of fractures that way as well. So it's very rarely truly the answer to simply avoid or do away with an entire movement category like spinal flexion or spinal rotation, twisting completely, because the long-term inevitable outcome of that is that you will lose the ability to hydrate and provide circulation for those tissues. You're going to lose mobility, strength, capacity, the normal range of motion and mobility that you need in your daily life to complete those activities. And actually, when you lose the strength, then those daily activities become more dangerous because you're constantly operating at the margins of your capacity, just doing a simple thing like picking up a bag of groceries or a kitchen appliance. So like Sarah said, it's all about just doing it smartly and being educated on what's actually happening during those movements. Ellen has a great question. Are the classes all video or live? Is there a specific time one can join a live class? Great question. So Kenny, I'm going to hand this over to you since you deal with the practicalities of the program. But to answer the second part, we do not none of our program content, the workouts, are actually delivered in a live setting because we have clients all over the US and Europe. So it would be to the detriment of our actual group participants to be restricted to a live class time that in most instances would probably not work for a huge proportion of the group. So, but we do have regular Zoom calls, which are for the purposes of connecting with your coach and the rest of your group. And yeah, Kenny, maybe you can talk a little bit about how the actual program is delivered and how it's interactive.
Yeah, definitely. So we are currently using an app that delivers the workouts directly to you through that platform. So we simply have you download the app. We have regular Zoom calls, as Yenny mentioned, where we teach you how to use the app. And from there, you can do the workouts on your own time. They are prescribed on certain days based on what cohort you're in. So, from there, we have several days a week of strength training, an active recovery day, and a yoga day. So on your own time, on your own schedule, you go through and complete them. We check in with you. I saw a few more questions coming down the line, so I won't jump ahead too much. But essentially, there's a live video. There's a video that you can watch that shows you how to complete the exercise, and then we also have the ability to do form checks where you can film a video and send it to us, and we can give you feedback on the spot about what you're doing. So lots of different options there for you to feel supported and have the ability to use technology to our advantage in this case. So yeah, the app is fantastic and is really well thoughtfully put together. And we have, like I said, a demo video for every single exercise and even a circuit video for all the exercises in a row. So yeah, I think that covers it.
Yeah, great question, great answer. And the other part about the workouts and the way that they're delivered in the app is that you are following along with these custom filmed, fully narrated and demonstrated videos of the exercises. We basically prompt you for feedback every single step along the way so that we get as much information about you as possible and how you are responding to the exercise stimulus so that we can progress you appropriately so you can get the best results possible. It is highly structured, so you have things assigned on specific days of the week, although you can move them around within the week to suit your schedule. There is a high level of accountability, not just in the calendar format of the program, but your coach, who is very much going to hit you up if they see that you miss more than a couple of workouts. So Miriam, hopefully that answers your follow-up question about needing a daily schedule and routine to track as well. Cindy's asking if she has travel coming up during the time periods shown. How can I make up classes that I might miss? So this is a great question and something that comes up for a lot of our participants. We're happy to offer extended access within reason and some flexibility so you have enough time to complete any classes that you missed. We also offer some travel-friendly workouts that require just a resistance band so you can easily pack that into your luggage. The main thing is just that you are staying consistent. That's really what we encourage. So if you skip a couple of days of strength training, but do a resistance band workout instead, that is perfect. Like, it's not about perfection, just consistency over time. And if you have concerns about travel, that should not be a barrier to you improving your bone density, and we'll happily work with you. Just let us know when you get in touch or fill out your intake form. Okay, great question. To what extent, if any, does your program address pelvic floor conditioning, even if indirectly? So it is not a pelvic floor conditioning program, and it is not cued or instructed as such. However, all strength training, especially the large, full compound body movements that our program uses, is core strengthening, and your pelvic floor is part of your core. So it is being targeted in every exercise that utilizes that. Sarah, this is something, well, actually, Sarah and Michaela, you both deal with this a lot in your instruction, and this is like one of your areas of specialty. Sarah, maybe you can talk a little bit more about this.
Yeah, and just to kind of echo what Yenny just said, pelvic floor isn't directly the primary focus in this program, but it's definitely woven in. There's no way that we can't discuss this when we're talking about strength training, especially through breath work. So coordinating your inhales and your exhales to the movement can help activate and kind of fine tune the pelvic floor connection as it relates to core activation and postural strength. And these all kind of support the pelvic floor function indirectly. And we do cue those connections throughout the program as well.
Thanks for that. And actually, there's a related question about whether there's any overlap or suggestions as to how to combine this with pelvic floor therapy. I'm guessing that if you have a specific issue with your pelvic floor that you are seeking medical care for, that that would be complementary to what you're doing in the program, and obviously the program would not replace it just because it isn't specific to your needs or the care that you're receiving from your medical provider. So that would just be something to discuss in a little bit more detail if you decided to join the group. Another good question. I'm surprised that it took this long for medication to enter the mix. I have been diagnosed with severe osteoporosis and need to take Prolia. I'm worried with the side effects from these drugs. Will this program help so that I don't need to take the meds? So it's not in our scope of practice to comment on or make recommendations about pharmaceutical use because that's a highly personal situation that you should discuss with your medical provider. What we can say, though, is that even with severe osteoporosis, the mechanisms of bone metabolism stay the same, meaning if you appropriately load the bones in the right ways with the right exercises progressively over time, their density will improve. We have had multiple people in our program with very severe diagnoses, including we saw recently a lumbar score of -5, another one with -4.5. The former is actually still in the program, so she is on her way. The latter saw a 20% increase in her bone density after being in our program for a year. So we don't guarantee any specific outcomes just because people's situations and physiologies vary widely, but hopefully that answers your question as far as what to expect. Lorraine is saying that she's been told to avoid forward folds and spinal twists. Hopefully that question was answered a little bit earlier. Not to be feared, just get some education and professional guidance on what is appropriate for you. Leslie's asking, will you advise us about how to absorb nutrients like calcium and vitamin D? So we are going to sort of stick to the topic of exercise for bone density in this webinar, just so that we don't get too off track. And it's very difficult to give individualized guidance in the context of a public Zoom webinar. However, maybe Michaela can provide some very general kind of big picture pointers about this and how we can ensure the sort of proper absorption of these nutrients.
Sure. So, this can get a little bit in the weeds, but really a big picture is, of course, you want to have pretty good gut health in order to be able to absorb nutrients. So that is something that you can kind of like take a little pulse check on yourself. Like, are you having daily bowel movements? Are you experiencing gut issues, bloating, gas, constipation, loose stools? And if you're saying yes to one or more of those, you might want to kind of reach out to a nutrition or a medical provider to assess your gut health. But gut health is going to be number one to be able to absorb nutrients. And then just a kind of big picture tip when it comes to calcium is that you do want to spread it out throughout the day, so we can only absorb so much at a given time. So if you're taking a calcium supplement or you're really focusing in on calcium rich foods, try to spread them out throughout different meals. So you might spread your supplements between like breakfast and lunch, and then just making sure that you're eating calcium throughout the calcium rich foods throughout the day to improve that absorption. And then when it comes to vitamin D, the best source to get that is from the sun. Of course, you want to be mindful about too much sun exposure, but it's a great opportunity. We're in summer, you can really get some good vitamin D right now. So trying to expose some big swaths of tissue for 10 to 15 minutes to sun can be a really great way to get some highly available vitamin D into your system.
Perfect. Thank you. Great question here about whether single leg strength exercises are any better or worse for axial loading. Karen, do you want to tackle that one?
Mute. Yeah, so single leg exercises, because you're talking, I'm going to back up here. Your axial loading, we're talking about your spine because it's the center axis of your body. So when we're talking about shifting to things that are single leg movements, because we're now talking about something that's happening below the level of the pelvis, that increases the loading for the leg, but not necessarily for the spine. It really depends on how much weight you're holding in your hands while you're doing those movements, because we need to hold weights in the hands to have that compressive force, or you need to be wearing a weight vest or something else that's adding additional load from the shoulders down versus from the hips down. So it really depends, if you're doing a single leg move but holding less weight in your hands to be able to accommodate that, you're actually getting less loading on your spine than you would be if you're doing a double leg movement.
Yeah, so it's more about the amount of weight and the position of the weight than single leg versus double leg. Although single leg versions of movements are, Michaela, I see you nodding because I think you know where I'm going with this, but they're a great way to progress the level of difficulty and challenge of specific movements. Michaela, maybe you can talk a little bit about that, since that's something that comes up, especially in like the long-term use of strength training to
Yeah,
support intensity.
we were just talking about that in our staff meeting this week. It's just like this idea, we have this question comes up of like, where does this end? Like what weight am I done progressing? And it's really like there is no weight where you're done progressing necessarily. Um, there are techniques you can use to increase the challenge when we're looking at progressive overload. And I think this is especially important when you're thinking about a home program where you don't have access to the types of weights that you have access to at a gym. So we do utilize single leg exercises or like split stance exercises as a way of increasing that challenge for the purpose of progressive overload over time, because that's placing more muscular demand on the leg than splitting the work between two legs. And then it's also really important to remember that muscle has a huge impact on bone, both because it kind of pulls on the bone, and that pull is a stimulus to lay down more of those bone to excuse me, a stimulus for the osteoblast to lay down more bone cells, as well as the muscles have many kind of hormonal and cellular responses that speak to the bone and actually improve bone health. So progressive overload can get kind of in the weeds when we start to really get into it, but single leg exercises are one way to increase the challenge and improve that bone health.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Here's an interesting question. I have concerns about doing this on my own with hypermobility challenges. Thoughts on this? Okay, so this is I don't want to dwell on this too long because this is not like a generally applicable situation. However, we do actually have lots of experience on the team with hypermobility. Michaela has lots of personal and professional experience with it. You can also Google my name and hypermobility to see some of the continuing education resources that I've created for other movement professionals on how to work with hypermobility. I've been a guest on several podcasts on the topic as well. The reality is that with hypermobility and osteoporosis, there's a surprising amount of overlap between what you should be doing as part of a strength training routine, and that's working to strengthen your muscles and connective tissue in a moderate and controlled range of motion. So we would, of course, be mindful of your hypermobility concern, and your coach would check in with you specifically about that. But in general, you would be doing the same things, which is to strain stability, muscular control, strength in all those vulnerable areas, especially with the spine and the hips, because those are common areas of bone density loss and hypermobility. So it's a surprising amount of overlap between those two things. And obviously, it's quite hard to say anything without knowing much about you or your situation as well. Okay, I think this is one for Sarah. My doc wants me to see an endocrinologist. I'm concerned they'll want me to do the bone drugs, which I don't want to do. Is there any reason to have this appointment? I don't think we can tell you yes or no, because that's a very personal thing, but Sarah's a medical provider, so she'll have her own take on this.
Sure. I mean, if you were one of my patients, generally speaking here, I would say that yes, seeing an endocrinologist can still be helpful, even if you are unsure about the medication. They could help you identify why your bone loss is happening, and they can check for any underlying issues like hormones, thyroid issues, vitamin D deficiencies, and it really can help give you a fuller picture of your bone health. And ultimately, you don't have to commit to any medications. It could be used as an appointment to just gather information so that you can make an informed choice for your own body.
More information probably never hurts, I guess is the bottom line. Yeah. Okay, Kenny, maybe you can talk about weight vests. We've got a couple horrible questions back to back. What size of weight would you suggest for the vest? Do we recommend a specific one? What weights should be in the vest? I know nothing about them. Can you give us a general overview of how we use them in a program?
Yeah, we just talked about this again in our staff meeting a couple days ago. The answer is it depends, and it depends on kind of your past and where you're at in your fitness journey. Typically, we tell people to start on the lighter side because it does take some time to adjust to the weight vest and the stimulus that comes from the weight vest. So generally speaking, we have people start anywhere from 8 pounds to 16 pounds at the top end. So we usually recommend a adjustable weight vest that you can use to add or take weight away from. And it's all about that slow, steady approach, just like weight training. So starting out small with a weight vest, starting out light, our exposure in the program is 10 minutes per day, 4 times per week. So you're getting around 40 to 45 minutes of a weight vest a week. And most people find that to be a good starting point. If you have experience with a weight vest in the past and maybe you're used to walking with one or moving around your house with a weight vest on, then you may be able to do a little bit longer or a little bit heavier. But that's the beauty of the program, right? The coach is there by your side, guiding you as you try this vest on and get used to how it feels. And then commonly what happens is if someone wears it for too long of a period of time, they experience soreness and tenderness through the shoulders and the neck and all the postural muscles. So that's a key indication that we need to back off a little bit and wear it less or wear less weight. So in terms of the weight vests, in the practical standpoint, that's kind of a good rule of thumb. In terms of a specific weight vest brand, I don't know if you ladies know the brand that we recommend off the top of the head, but really any of them that fit well and conform well to the body. There's many different body shapes out there. So ensuring that the fit is appropriate for you. And we touch on that during the seminar a bit, how to properly fit a weight vest to you, and having it be adjustable and fit well and be confident and comfortable is really the keys. Brands are not super important to me or the team, I guess.
Yeah, and just to provide a little bit of practical context, whenever somebody registers for our program, they do get a really comprehensive onboarding packet that includes a full equipment list that links directly to specific items that have been tried and tested that we recommend and know work really well. So you do receive both those specific recommendations as well as the very detailed guidance of actually using the weight vest and incorporating it into your routine. Thanks, Kenny. Deb has a question. She is 74 years young, used to do yoga and weightlifting, and for the last 5 years, she's had neck surgery and almost recovered from right thumb reconstruction due to arthritis. Also received an osteopenia diagnosis a few years ago with a second DEXA scan now showing a bit more bone loss. Is this a good program for me to start getting back into better shape? Yes, especially since you have a previous history of steady exercise, the yoga and the weightlifting. You have that baseline of fitness established, and the research shows that it is far easier to get back to that level of fitness when your body's been there before. So, when people come into our programs, and some of them have been exercising their entire lives, and they're very shocked and sad to receive the osteoporosis diagnosis. What we always tell them that it has never been wasted. Like any exercise that they've done is simply giving them a huge head start when it comes to now to undertaking this particular style of training for the purposes of improving bone density. So your higher level of baseline fitness is going to help you hugely. And we have a lot of clients that have had various surgeries and other kind of ailments. The arthritis is very, very common. Joint replacements are very common. So those are things that we're very used to handling in our groups. And that leads me to a question from Patricia asking whether the trainers allow for those with artificial joints by suggesting how to adjust movements. Yes, so our demographic, our community is made up of older folks, many of whom have had these surgeries. Michaela, maybe you can talk a little bit about this, and just, again, there's a lot of overlap between like what you would do to support a healthy, stable joint after a joint replacement surgery and what you would do in the context of osteoporosis. So maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, so after, a joint replacement surgery, the main goals are really just going to be to provide more strength and stability around that joint to really support that part of the body. And then the biggest, I think, adjustment that we might make and that we typically find for someone with a joint replacement is just really looking at the range of motion. So if there's any kind of like preset limits on that joint, we just want to make sure that you're not kind of trying to push past those, and because that can be painful and uncomfortable and just ill-advised. So we would just really monitor that range of motion and work with you to find that right range of motion for the exercises. But building up that strength and stability around the joint is going to help really support that replacement and your recovery as well.
Awesome, thank you. Great question about running. Does running help build bone, or is it similar to walking since it's just body weight loading? Sort of. Karen, do you want to tackle this one?
Sure. So yes and no, there's a little bit of both, and a lot of runners do end up becoming diagnosed with osteoporosis or osteopenia. Part of the reason for that is because your bones are a little bit like toddlers, and they get really bored really quickly with the same stimulation happening over and over again. So when you go out for a run, the little mechanosensors in your bones pay attention for the first few steps, and then after that they're like, oh, we've kind of been here, done this, we don't need to pay attention anymore. So that's part of the reason why the progressive loading and the variability of different exercises becomes really important, because we're starting to load the bones from different angles using different weights. So we just need a little bit more variety than running.
Yeah, perfect answer. I think, yeah, Michaela has said it in the past in the context of like the bones getting bored, and they don't like listen to the signal anymore when it just like it just tunes it out basically after a while. Yeah. Vibration plates. Yes, we get asked about these a lot. We have these at the gym. My rheumatologist says no. My grandson has a small version for ADHD autism stimulation. What is the current research? Yeah, so vibration plates are not a very well researched thing at all when it comes to bone density, which is why we don't recommend them, because we basically don't want to waste anybody's time or money with things that may or may not work. We just stick with the things that we know do work. But on the whole, if you think about the need for this progressive overloading where the load continually is like changing and increasing in challenge, this is very difficult to accomplish with a vibration plate, which is going to very quickly hit a ceiling of how much stimulation you can provide. The other thing about this is that the location of the stimulus is kind of not very well placed relative to the target tissues. If you're standing on a vibrating plate, the stimulus, the vibration has to move up through the tissues of your legs into the hips and the spine, and it weakens and disperses throughout the body as it's doing that. So by the time it reaches the areas that you're trying to get it into, it's basically negligible. So if you like them, there's all kinds of other benefits, but it's useful to know, whether you're getting bang for your buck when it comes to bone density. Regarding weighted vests, how much weight will you need to have a positive effect? Will it make it worth your time? How many hours a day or week? So just to kind of recap, we don't by any means recommend that the weight vest should be your only intervention. We treat it as like icing on the cake and a bonus. So from that perspective, we can't really say like how many hours a day or week. In order for it to be effective as your only intervention, you would have to increase the weight to an extent that would become very uncomfortable. Not to mention that you would be missing out on all the functional benefits of an actual exercise movement routine. Patricia, we didn't actually have an equipment list shown here. The list that you saw was just for the movement demo here. But if you want to send an email to heretohelp@kariprehab.com, Juliana can pop her email in the chat again. Then we can send you an equipment list that we send out to people before they register for the program if they just want to get an approximate idea of what we recommend and what the estimated cost is. How can you tell me if your pose is correct if doing your program? Melissa, I'm assuming you're asking about how we provide oversight and supervision within the program. Michaela, maybe you want to tackle this one?
Sure. So we do that a couple of different ways. And the first way is through the app itself. The app allows you to send videos to your coach. So if you're ever concerned that you're not doing an exercise or a yoga pose correctly, you can send a video of yourself doing it, and your coach will be able to reply either a written response or they can send you a video back and they can kind of demo some of maybe if there was a misalignment, what that looked like, and then how you could correct it. And then as well in the Zoom meetings, you also have the opportunity to ask your coach, and that's where you can get a little bit of like one-on-one response in real time. And that's particularly true during the first 4 weeks of the program. We have our kind of introduction meeting where we introduce the program to you. After that, there's an intro week, and that intro week goes through key movement mechanics. So we go over the hinge, we go over the squat, the rows, the overhead press, all of these really important exercises that you're going to be using throughout the program. And with each of those days, you have the opportunity to send a video in and get feedback. And then after that, we kind of introduce phase one, and you have a meeting for that. And then the Zoom meetings that follow that are called office hours, and office hours are all for you. So that's where you guys get to come in, you get to bring your questions. Your coach can do movement demos live. You can, if you are open and want to, you can do a little bit of a movement. Your coach can give you some feedback on it. So we get to do this kind of in two ways, again, through the Zoom meetings, through the app, and the video feedback that we can respond to you through the app.
Perfect. And this ties into Karen's question about whether it's safe to participate in an online program versus trying to work locally in person if an appropriate teacher can be found. So for a little bit of context, we've been running our virtual program for about 3 years now. And each group, we run them about every month. We have about 20 people in each group, and we have 0 program-related injuries. In fact, you could make the argument based on what Michaela was just saying, that since you are in private communication with your coach, both written format and video, as well as those live Zoom meetings, that you're actually getting more oversight than you would be in a group fitness setting where there's one teacher trying to look at 20 to 30 people all at the same time. The other part of your question about finding an appropriate teacher, some people definitely prefer to work with in-person providers. The reason we made our program virtual is because they are extremely thin on the ground. And most places, for example, I'm in the state of North Carolina, there is not a single osteo-qualified strength trainer in the state to work with. So you can look on the Bone Health and Osteoporosis Foundation's BoneFit provider list to see if there is somebody who's BoneFit qualified in your state. Keep in mind, though, that the Bone Fit qualification is a general weekend course, and it is open to everybody, not just strength trainers. So the person that you are looking for is a strength trainer. Anybody else is going to be giving you body weight exercise, which can be helpful. It teaches you the safe movement mechanics. They can work on your balance, all of that stuff, but it's not going to be something that meaningfully increases your bone density unless you are being externally loaded in a progressive manner. Hopefully that's helpful. Ellen is asking about whether this is good for somebody with scoliosis and stenosis pain. Karen.
How did I know you were going to call on me? Hi, Ellen. So I have scoliosis also. And a lot of the techniques that we use for people who have osteopenia or osteoporosis, where we have to be really sensitive and aware of the positioning of the spine, they also apply for people who have things like scoliosis and stenosis. We've had other people with scoliosis come through the program and they do really well with it. And you just want to stay in close contact with your coach. You'll probably find that I'd be asking you questions about how things are feeling on a pretty regular basis. And we just want to make sure that we take a look at your videos from the early part of our program where Michaela was saying that we ask you to send videos to us so that we can give you some really good feedback on your positioning. But yes, this is absolutely appropriate for you.
Perfect. Thank you. Rita, yes, there will be a replay. We're going to email that out to you, but you do need to be opted in to receive newsletters from us in order to receive that. If you're unsure, Juliana is going to drop her email address in the chat, so you can send her an email to ask if you are opted in to hear from us if you are unsure. Thank you for sharing with your colleagues. We really appreciate that. Oh, Sarah, I'm glad you're back. Somebody's asking, if your scores improve dramatically, can you return to fuller expression in yoga? I'm assuming things like forward fold, shoulder stand. And what are your thoughts on that?
To unmute here. Yeah, I mean, if your scores improve, that is really a great sign, but it doesn't always mean that you can kind of jump back into a like deep forward folds or shoulder stands. Bone density really is a part of the picture, but we also have to consider like bone quality, like posture habits and fracture history. I usually recommend continuing to move with intention, using hip hinges instead of the spinal flexion and really avoiding that end range loading through the spine. We can still really build strength, flexibility, and the freedom in movement without going back into those risky positions, is what I would say.
Perfect. Thank you. Another question that we get quite often is the program safe for someone who has had compression fractures that have healed? Yes, absolutely. And this is another thing that you can look up to see the research on. There is lots of research that confirms that if your compression fracture is healed, your bones are continuing to respond in the same way to loading. So it is safe. We just want to be really mindful of the alignment and the sort of cautious, conservative, progressive approach. Great question about the structure of the program. Does the cohort get the same exercises, or is the program catered to the participants' needs and limitations? So it's definitely catered in all the different ways that we've mentioned, such as prior injuries, joint replacements, surgeries, all of that kind of stuff. The exercise selection and the program structure and progression are the things that we use research to establish to make sure they're both safe and effective. So for those reasons, we want to minimally mess with the program structure and the exercise selection so that it stays effective. So we would not, for the best results, it is best to do it like as written. However, the purpose is to meet everybody where they're at, meaning that we will kind of adjust the starting weights that you use, the progression that you go through when you increase the weights, and help you adjust the rep schemes and all of that stuff as you go so that it is in line with your capacity. So you're being basically appropriately challenged, but without pushing too far to or risking injury. Kenny, maybe you can talk a little bit about this because you're out there kind of basically helping people make those choices about when to increase their weights and alter their rep schemes based on their feedback.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, as Jenny said, delivery of the program will stay consistent throughout the cohort, with the exception of what she mentioned, right? So you come to a coach and you say, "I've been doing reverse lunges and I'm having, significant knee pain on my right knee when I step back." So that's a great example of an opportunity for us to explore a modified movement pattern or a supported movement pattern. So instead of doing a reverse lunge, body weight, or maybe you've weighted it and it's causing pain, we would do some sort of a regression. And I would definitely have you film that movement so that we can get some insight into what is going on. Maybe there's some corrective form that we can do, or maybe there's a way to change the speed or the way we're doing the exercise, or maybe we need to hold on to something or limit range of motion. So there are a lot of different aspects to exercises that may not work for you that we can kind of tailor to you. And as those pop up, the biggest key for that is just communication with your coach. Uh, I can't tell you how many times people have kind of gone for a while and been like, "Oh, this has bothered me for a while," and if you don't tell me that, I can't decipher that. So, in the program, in the app, there's the ability for you to type away and send us notes about how things are going. And that's a great opportunity, in the program itself to say, "I tried this exercise and it didn't work. It caused me a lot of pain. It caused me a lot of discomfort." To me, that's going to be a red flag. I'm sure the other coaches would agree. And then we're going to dive deeper into what's causing this. Is it maybe we had a replacement of the knee or the hip or something? And this kind of ties all that together. So if you have certain things that aren't working for you, you've come through a surgery and you're still recovering, maybe that exercise just isn't for you. So we have a massive library of different exercises that we can pull from and kind of plug and chug into your program to make sure that you have the most effective and safe training.
That's an excellent answer. Thanks so much. Do you deal with Paget's disease, and is it possible to treat it without Fosamax or other biphosphonates? We don't deal with that specifically, and it's out of our scope of practice to advise on pharmaceuticals. Sorry, Lori. Laura's asking if the program offers nutritional assistance. The short answer is no, because we can't do that effectively in a group setting. Michaela, maybe you can expand on this a little bit more, because you do offer one-on-one nutritional consulting services for anybody that would like them.
Yeah, I have a couple different ways you can work with me. You can do one of my favorites, which is a hair tissue mineral analysis. And this is where we take a sample of your hair and it shows your mineral status. And that can be a really, really great starting point to kind of fine tune some stress management habits, because that actually is a really big signifier of stress, as well as dietary changes that might need to happen. And I won't go into the details of that. If you want, I'll drop my email in the chat and you can reach out to me. And then I also work with people one-on-one if you want to take a really deep dive into your nutrition. And my one-on-one does include the hair test as well.
Awesome, thank you. Do you do an intake assessment for each participant so that you can advise us on how to progress from current weight levels? I already use a weighted vest and wrist weights when walking. Yes, so everybody that comes into our program is screened as part of the intake form. So we're looking for red flags like chronic or severe pain, unhealed fractures, anything that basically makes it not productive and safe for you to do a weighted resistance training program. So that intake form gives us a lot of information about where you're at, but really the meat and potatoes of that is your interaction with your coach and how you're reporting back to them throughout the program about your weight choices, how many reps you did, what was your rate of perceived exertion, were you sore the next day, was it easy, could you have done more reps? All of that information is how they tell you when they think you should be increasing the weight or adding more reps. And there is also a live movement screen at the beginning of the program in the first meeting that is led by Dr. Avery. So you do have a pair of medical eyes on you as well. Hopefully that answers your question. Miriam, or Ellen, excuse me, feel free to send us an email about the emotional support component. We'd be happy to discuss that with you. Thanks so much. Just email help@chiroprehab.com. is this program good for somebody who has not exercised in a few years? I'm 74 and diagnosed with osteopenia a few years ago. You are basically our exact client that will benefit from this program. I think if you're the same Deb who was asking about this earlier, you've been active previously in your life. That establishes a good baseline of fitness that really lets you hit the ground running when you start to incorporate this kind of strength training routine. And like we've mentioned, our program is highly supportive. So you have the guidance and one-on-one feedback from your coach the entire time. So yes, absolutely. And we love to see people coming in with osteopenia because, it's easier to get out of that than osteoporosis. So yes, absolutely. Karen is asking, I walk with 6 pounds in my waist fanny pack. Does that help? Karen, maybe you want to tackle this one.
Hi, Karen. So that is because that doesn't apply that axial loading to your spine. It's below the level of your spine. You're getting a little bit of compression through the legs and the pelvis, perhaps. But it really isn't enough because your body adapts really well to having the same stimulus over and over again, kind of like what we were talking about with both walking and running. So unless you're actually progressing the amount of weight that you're using, that's giving you very little benefit in the long term. So you really need to be doing something where there's some opportunity for progression there.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody's heard that maintaining muscle mass is as important as maintaining bone health. Yes, the two things function together and are inseparable because they are the musculoskeletal system with no space in between. They're functionally inseparable from each other. And any resistance training program is also going to increase muscle mass also, which is super important for bone health in a variety of different ways. This webinar is way too short to get into all the mechanisms through which one influences the other, but yes, they do. How can professionals measure muscle mass? So this is called a body composition scan. You can actually request it as part of your DEXA as well. And it's something that we really encourage our clients to do because your body composition increases, your muscle mass increases far more quickly than your bone density does. So if you go to your like an interim DEXA scan before your next one 2 years later is scheduled, seeing that you're gaining muscle mass is a really good way to also see that what you're doing is working and it's having a positive impact. So it can really help you to stay motivated while you're waiting for that next DEXA scan to roll around. Also, I think a lot of our clients will report, they feel stronger. They're a lot more confident in their daily lives and their tasks and activities. You start to obviously have better muscle tone as well. So the changes are apparent quite quickly. HRT, please talk to your medical provider about that. That's not in our scope of practice. Wrist weights, they provide a little bit of axial loading. Again, not a meaningful amount, not the most optimal position, and very limited in terms of how much you can progress. So if you like them, keep using them. Is your program safe for somebody who has lower back degenerative disc disease in the L5 and SI joints? Sarah, maybe you can talk about this.
Generally speaking, yes, safe. We focus on core strength, alignment, muscle control, and all of these do help to support the lower back and reduce strain in those areas. And this is what you would get if you were coming to physical therapy for these conditions. So as long as you're not having any major symptoms that would impact your ability to exercise, then yes, very safe. And the strength and support also do help to take the pressure off of that L5 segment and the SI joint. So, and also we want to mention that everything is modifiable, and the goal is to build strength around the spine without aggravating it here. However, if you are having any aggravating symptoms, it might be wise to address that with your primary care physician or a physical therapist before hopping into the program.
Yeah, and I think it's useful to point out too, thank you, Sarah, that, a lot of the questions around like, I have X, Y, or Z spinal condition, an osteoporosis program is a spinal stabilization program. So in any other condition where our goal would be to provide better alignment, better muscular support and stability for the spine, you're going to be doing that as part of an osteoporosis program as well. So they tend to go hand in hand really, really well. And we do have lots of clients with spondylolysis, spondylolisthesis, stenosis, facet joint arthropathy, like name any spinal condition. It's most likely going to benefit from some strengthening for the muscles that support the spine. Any advantage to using ankle and or wrist weights? We've answered that. Hopefully, you've gotten some clarity on that. Not really is the short answer. Susie, we're happy to email you the equipment list. Can you please email here to help@kariprehab.com, and she will be happy to send you that. How effective is Pilates for osteoporosis? Karen, I'm going to have you answer this one since you're very well seasoned at dealing with this question.
So it's also a body weight exercise. So just like walking, just like yoga, Pilates is great for balance and, posture and proprioception, but there just isn't any added loading to that. So any exercise where you're only using your body weight and no additional load is not going to be enough to help with your bone health.
Thank you. And same with the rebounder trampolines. This is not a very well-researched thing. Again, we just recommend going with the thing that has tens of thousands of high-quality studies demonstrating its efficacy, just to save you the frustration of wasting a bunch of time and money, 2 years till your next DEXA scan, only to find out that the thing you tried didn't actually work. Related medical conditions can be helped by increasing muscle mass. I've been told to increase muscle mass to help with insulin resistance as well as weight loss. I'm assuming these are the same muscles and can trickle down to other health improvements. Yeah, so we're not in targeting individual muscles in an isolated way. If you are doing a resistance training program with full body compound movements, like the ones that were demonstrated here, then you're going to be building muscle in like a balanced way throughout your whole body. And that is completely correct that increased muscle mass has a massive host of benefits for overall health, including cognitive, endocrine, all kinds of systems that are dependent on good muscle mass as we age. How do you feel about bicycling for exercise, Michaela? And actually throw in Peloton bike and treadmill.
I saw that. I mean, for exercise, great, yay. For bone health, it might not be the most, it won't be the most effective tool because again, it is a body weight exercise. So it's not going to have that external load needed to stimulate the bone improvements that we're looking for. But if you love biking, you love your Peloton, your treadmill, don't get rid of them. Do the things you enjoy, but also add in the strength training so that you can do those with more confidence, safety, and you can feel stronger in your life in general.
Perfect. Thank you. Trampoline, we addressed already. How can you tell if you're actually using your muscles instead of tendons and ligaments? Your tendons and ligaments are not contractile tissue that have the capacity to generate movement. So if you're moving, you're using your muscles. How do I find a PT trained in osteoporosis? So you can look on the Bone Health and Osteoporosis Foundation's Bone Fit Provider Registry. Again, like we mentioned, our Dr. Avery here, she's a physical therapist, but the relevant part, in addition to being a physical therapist, is that she is a qualified strength trainer. So you are looking for a physical therapist who is qualified in strength training. Otherwise, they're giving you body weight exercise, which is going to be very limited in its efficacy. Okay, Laura has a quick question. Any specific shoes you would recommend to wear for people with osteoporosis? Kenny, maybe you can talk about this because this is coming back to this idea of impact and how that can help in general.
Yeah, I see the couple brands, Hoka and On and all that. So coming from someone who actually sold shoes professionally for several years, though those shoes that you mentioned are specific for running, and they are typically their main goal is for running and for providing cushion for you when you run. So in our program where we're trying to promote that kind of controlled and continuous impact and that steady growth of that impact, the more cushion that you have on the shoe, the less of that impact you're going to actually receive. It'll probably disseminate through the foam of the shoe. So, what I recommend to all of my clients, not just generally osteoporosis clients, is when you're strength training, is to either wear no shoes if that's possible for you, and to facilitate that, and you are comfortable, and we don't have other things going on like arthritis in our feet or anything, or wear a shoe that has a rubber sole. Something that has really good, kind of a flatter contact with the ground. So one of our favorite exercises for building impact is a calf raise heel drop, or some form of a stomp, or maybe even a jump, depending on your fitness level. So that kind of shoe, like a rubber soled shoe, is going to be a little bit better for that kind of impact exercise. Again, the more cushioning you have, that can open up issues in technique and form and stability as well through the feet. So I advise against shoes with what have a very high stack. So a stack is the height of the cushioning on the shoe. So a lot of modern day shoes are just getting lighter and lighter and high density foams, and they have a very high stack. And I've actually seen people have problems with stability and roll ankles and stuff like that with a higher stack or higher density, a cushion shoe. So personally, that's my recommendation, is to steer clear of a high cushion running shoe for strength training. If you're running and walking and stuff, fantastic. If you're actively strength training, go with something more moderate with a rubber sole, or even just socks or bare feet. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add to that.
Karen does. Oh no.
Okay.
I think on the whole, so the big picture concept here is that impact is not a bad thing, and in fact, it's one of the very desirable kinds of stimulus that are going to improve your bone density. We always tell people that if you're feeling a little bit anxious about incorporating the impact, a little bit of cushion can definitely help you get over that hump, so you start to feel more confident. But a more neutral shoe also promotes better, excuse me, better foot health. There is evidence to suggest that the more cushioned supportive shoes, essentially you're kind of outsourcing the task of your foot muscles of stabilizing your foot to the shoe. So those muscles end up weakening over time, which then can cause things like shin splits and plantar fasciitis. So I think as a team, we tend to kind of lean towards a more neutral profile and a more minimal style of shoe. There's some research also that suggests that the cushion shoes are designed to minimize impact, but your body, your brain actually wants the feel of your foot hitting the ground, because it's helping your proprioceptive system to determine where you are in space relative to other things around you. So putting on a more cushioned shoe or more cushioned flooring can end up subconsciously causing you to stomp your foot down harder in an effort to get that feedback of the impact, your foot hitting the ground. So it doesn't even quite work in the way that it's intended to, because your nervous system instinctively wants that ground feel and the impact. Yes, we can send you Michaela's email address. For some reason, I can't put it into the I can type it into the chat, but maybe Juliana can and add it in there. Otherwise, just email us here to help@kariprehab.com, and we'll be happy to send that out. Rita, thank you for sharing your email address as well. I'm gonna make sure that I grab that so that we can check that you are signed up and opted in. And I think that we've covered all 57 of the questions that came in. And we usually expect to go over time on these, because you guys bring so many interesting questions to the mix that generate lots of useful and beneficial discussion for everybody. So this is a good time to wrap it up. However, we are always available to answer your questions. If you have questions about the program, the upcoming start dates, anything like that, we are more than happy to answer those. The best thing to do is to subscribe to our newsletter, which you can do anywhere on our website. And we basically answer any queries that come in. You just have to hit reply to one of our newsletters and with your questions, and we will always respond within 3 business days, usually quite a bit sooner than that. Michaela, would you mind quickly screen sharing the slide with the upcoming program start dates and the QR code one more time for folks so that they can go to the website if they need to? I'm also going to look up our next Meet the Experts session so that we can let you know about that. So we host regular Meet the Experts sessions throughout the year, but they're usually within a couple of weeks of a program date starting. So these are a great way to simply hop on a Zoom call in a very friendly and informal environment so that you can talk to the team, ask any questions. Lots of people have specific questions about the program or about their kind of unique and individual needs. And whether the program is right for them. So that is what those sessions are for. Again, we do send out reminders about that in our newsletter. So the best thing to do is to be subscribed to that, and you'll get reminders about that well ahead of time. Our next Meet the Expert session is on July 21st, and you will have the team there to answer any questions that you might have. And just to generally connect, we think of them as like a virtual little coffee chat where everybody can grab a cup of tea or coffee and get together and discuss anything that's on your mind. With that said, I want to thank everybody again for spending part of your Saturday with us. Thank you so much for your insightful questions and your interest. We are here to help. You can hit us up via email. You can respond to one of our newsletters. You can write to us on social media. We love connecting with you, and I really want to thank you for your participation today. Thank you also to Michaela, Sarah, Karen, and Kenny. Really appreciate your time and your insights and your expertise. Thank you so much. Hope to see you somewhere online soon. Our next program is starting on July 28th, so you've got lots of time to join in if you're considering joining, and feel free to send us your questions in the meantime. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you somewhere online soon. Bye-bye.